I'm sorry.
Okay, it is 1:01. I call the special meeting of the governing body of the city of Blanco to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Lumpy,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Darren, present. Councilmember McClellan,
Present.
Councilmember Smith,
Present.
Councilmember Thurkill.
Here.
Great, thank you. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Just have a few announcements. The Blanco Underground Club will have their Christmas poker party on December 21st at 6 p.m. Santa returns to Blanco to read Night Before Christmas at 5:30 at the courthouse. This was originally going to be at Binsell Park, but because it's going to be so cold, they've moved it inside, so it'll be on the second floor of the courthouse. And the Texas State Parks first day hikes will begin January 1st. I just want to let everybody know that the winter storm is coming, so make preparations and get your pipes protected, stay warm. And lastly, as we come to the end of the week, it will be Christmas, so I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Going to move on to public comments. There are no public comments, so we are going to move on to item 1 under new business. Consideration, discussion, and take possible action on approval of an election services contract between the City of Blanco and the Blanco County Elections Office for the May 6, 2023 uniform election, special election, and related services. Ms. Spies? Okay.
So what I have here are is your supporting document to the back side of the contract. I have told everybody else, this contract is pretty high.
Sorry about that.
So if you flip it over, the total amount is on the second page. Don't let that frighten you. I have taken what we just did for a November 8th election and kind of tweaked it a little bit on the high side because I'm not sure what kind of rate increases we're going to be given come January 1. Some of these are based on a 2 week. So if you look at the Johnson City Blanco early voting workers, that's based on 2 weeks worth of wages. What the elections that y'all have in May are only 7 days of early voting. So that number will be drastically cut, right? Because we do a full 2 weeks. This is based on 2 weeks and Johnson City having 12-hour days the last week. So that's a pretty good amount. The other information, so I guess first let me tell you, we have hired an elections administrator. She will start January 3rd. We're so excited to have her on board. She comes from an election background. She's very knowledgeable in elections. I will be helping her along the way. Just getting familiar with what we do in Blanco County. The 5,000 site vendor support amount close to the bottom of the page, that could be a number that's not even part of the deal. I just added it there. For big elections, we like to have an extra hands on deck for this person would come from the equipment company. If something happens with the equipment, they're on site to help us troubleshoot what's wrong with the equipment. She may decide she doesn't even want that. We don't have that for small elections. We just have it for usually the big general elections is all we've used it for. But it's in there just in case she decides she wants to use it. It's at her disposal and it's not something that we haven't been transparent about with y'all from the beginning. So far, I have 2 signed contracts from other entities, the city of Johnson City and the groundwater. They are both potentially holding elections come May 6th. So if y'all have an election on May 6th and you jump on board with this, the cost could potentially be spread out 2 days. So it's not a full cost to any one of you. Any questions?
Yes. First question is, the polling place.
Councilmember Smith, can you make sure your mic's on?
I don't think it's going to.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I'll speak up. Okay. Only yours work. So, if the polling location would be where?
Well, since we just went to countywide polling, there would be, I'm anticipating 2 for early voting, 1 in Johnson City, 1 here in Blanco. And then on election day, we would have 4, 1 in each commissioner's precinct. So you would have 1 at the First Baptist Church here in Blanco, and you'd have 1 at the county annex.
Okay, that, we'd have 2 polling
We have
locations.
2 polling locations here in the city of Blanco. Mhm.
I think about it.
But they can vote anywhere. That's correct.
I've got a question. About how many people voted in our last election? Maybe 250?
At the most, yeah. And I will tell you this about the last election everybody had in May, which we did hear a little grumble from some individuals about the election in May, because they had to go here to vote, they had to go to the school to vote, they thought they could go to the county and vote. It was very confusing.
Right.
So when the schools come back after January, I know Johnson City ISD has had the contract passed off, not by me, but by somebody else. And they're considering it. So I'm gonna try to get in with the school here in Blanco and just see if they want to jump on board. And then that would make everybody's cost that much easier, be easier on your constituents as
What's
well.
the latest we could approve this and still have you handle the May election?
Well, I think you have to call your election, so the city would still be required to call the election. I think it's January 16th, 17th, something like that.
Yeah, but I think it's January 16th.
I think it is. So you would probably have until that time to sign the contract.
Right.
The sooner you sign it, the more we have on deck, the better this we can work
Right.
on after January.
Participants would dilute our responsibility.
For sure, for sure. And then, so what I told the other 2 that I've had a meeting with, now that I know that they're on board, I will go back when we come back from Christmas and revamp this to show cost divided by your number of voters. Which I had talked to Ms. Cassidy before the meeting started, and Officer Rubin helped me go next door. I've asked for a list of utility customers to help better make sure we have every voting constituent within the city of Blanco. We have them coded correctly in our system. Since redistricting, nobody's perfect. We may have slipped somebody out of the city on accident, and we just want to make sure we get them back in there. Not that it's happened, we just want to verify.
All right.
I have a question. How would this be different from when we've been, well, we're going to cities?
Does it ourselves?
Yes, how will it look different, expense wise?
There's multiple differences. So number 1, when we do it on our own, it's paper ballots versus the county does it all electronic.
Yeah.
So the swiping of the ID and everything is electronic, where now we have to manually check it in. So the process will be smoother, quicker if we go with the county. And secondly, so the options of where they could vote, like right now, they come to City Hall or they go to school if we contract with the school. Last time I talked to the school, they weren't sure if they were having an election. But so they have more choices, like Kristen was saying, when they come to vote, they can go countywide and vote instead of voting here for the city election, voting there for the county election, voting there for the library, it's all in one spot. They can do all of it. And then also just transparency, or, they can't say, oh, y'all, tampered with anything. It's like a third party handling it all. So it looks better for the residents, and I think it's like easier on residents to vote. I think we'll get a better turnout because they have better options.
And if I'm understanding correctly, the county would also be covering all the workers. So Lori doesn't have to go and find the election judge and all of that type of stuff. That is, okay.
Right, and I still do all the postings, and I still have to be at City Hall on election day in case they need anything. All right, John?
And the only thing you would have to post, you wouldn't have anything to post because that's part of.
Oh,
this.
just the
You
election?
would have to call the election or cancel the election. However it
Okay.
works. That's all the city's required to
Sign
do.
me that.
And we basically do the rest. And so, for y'all, if we can get the school on board, it would be a one-stop shop. You would go one place, you would vote for your city and your school at one time.
If the school has an election.
If the school has an election and if they're willing to participate.
So have the libraries ever contracted with y'all?
Johnson City Library has a November election, so they
Okay.
automatically jump on board. I have not heard from this library here.
I don't know if there is one, but that was another location that everybody had to go to.
That's correct. And so, that'll be my next stop on invite to Johnson City is to reach out to them to see if they are potentially gonna have an election. I know Johnson City told me way in advance that their board members that were up for reelection had already resigned, their information to be back on the ballot. And the closer it got, she would message me once a week and say, I don't foresee we having anybody else. She canceled the election with them.
And also, with the special election, with the vacancy, that's wrapped into this as well.
Thank you, Bill.
So for my benefit, for instance, last May's election, our local election, did we do that ourselves?
Yes.
And so
We contracted with the school and the groundwater district, and the groundwater district has already they've already signed a contract.
any idea what the cost of putting on the election that way versus?
When we
have in
do
front of
it,
us?
when we do it ourselves, it usually varies from like 1,500 up to 5,000.
The big difference.
Yeah.
37,000 perhaps cost share with these other districts.
Correct. Correct. And like I said,
37 is the total for everybody, right? Not just Blanco, or that's just Blanco?
no, 37 total would be our base to start, and then we divide that however many ways. So you could potentially take your $5,000 off if she decides not to have site support. Your $4,000 for early voting workers, that will be, I'm anticipating a little over half to be cut. Because you only have 7 days, not potentially 10. We
Right.
had 11, and we had
Right.
early voting for 12 hours each day in Johnson City the last week.
And we don't have to do 12-hour days anymore.
Right.
They
So-
did away with that the last election, so there's no longer 12-hour days. There's just no lunch hours, so it goes, there's
We're
like
required to do
9,
9 hours.
right, it's like 9 hours, if you do like 8 to 5 or something.
But the number we're looking at, it's not that it's gonna be divided by 3 if these other 2 districts participate, they've signed off. This is what it's gonna cost us, but there's some potential cost sharing in here that would be taken out.
Right, but you would
On the
still
line
take,
items.
but you would still take that number divided by 3.
This is still divided by 3. This is the total for the county election.
That's what I just spent roughly with a really gracious pad on it that we did for the November election.
So if the 2 that are already signed up, so the 2 that are signed up already, they would divide the 37 in 2. And then if we participated, that number would be divided by 3.
That's correct. And if the schools jump on board and the library has a bus fee, they jump on board, and that's 6.
Yeah.
So like I said, once I know how many people are gonna actually be with us, we would get this more concrete into a better number with what each entity, which, the groundwater right now is gonna suffer a lot of the costs because they have more voters.
Right.
Because they run by county precinct lines, not by city limit, like you and Johnson. So Plus, like somebody said the other day, and Lori just said it really takes the liability off of your city individual to run the election. We're kind of a third-party independent person. We're kind of seasoned to being heckled for, thankfully, nobody has heckled us in Blanco County, for election month, but I feel like we do a pretty good job.
And does it include early voting too? Or just, okay.
Yeah, it's all in here.
So early voting would be countywide also.
Well, it's not really
Or-
about because you can.
It's just the two,
anywhere.
it's just the two locations.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, there are how many registered voters in the county? You've got an example in here. I'm trying to extrapolate that back out.
So, as of today, there's like 10,200 and something, maybe 300. I didn't look before I left.
10,000.
Right.
And then Blanco is probably,
Well, your city of Blanco number, which is why I have asked for the report, is about a little over 1,200.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Mhm, that sounds right.
Yeah, so we just want to make sure we tie that number down.
so are we looking at potentially 12% of that cost? I guess I understand.
Yeah, I hear it divided by 3, but then I see that we would be on 8% of the total cost, according as your example, registered voters.
So it'll be broken down by your number of registered
Okay,
voters.
so that looks like it would be 8%, 8.3%,
Mm-hmm.
So,
as an example.
Right, depending on how many entities jump on board. And how many entities, that's correct.
sorry.
So if you need to do the math for us,
Yeah, I mean, we're looking-
37, let's just say we sign up, if the total cost for the election, 37,000. And let's not count the school, but let's just say we jump on with what you already know is going on in May, and we know roughly how many voters we have, so what would we guesstimate we're actually looking, paying in May if we do this contract?
Well, that's where I would like to go back and put it on paper,
Okay,
because then there's a formula that would take this
okay,
and put it down a little tighter.
great, that would be super.
This is just what I've given everybody, just as an idea.
Super, thank you.
Because I mean, like I said, there are some of these costs that are padded a little bit because I'm not sure what the vendor is going to up our rates to from January. We did have a rate hike last January. But some of these other ones, it just depends on the hours that are decided on for election times. The county pays election workers $15 an hour. I really wish we could pay them a lot more because they are really the staple behind an election. But I've gotten to 15 in a year, so that's pretty good.
Well, I would say personally, I love the idea of it and the concept and the benefits to the voters. I would just feel better if I really knew what we were spending, or a little
Right.
closer to the reality, because I'm having a hard time figuring out what the reality of the spending is.
Right, and like down here, we have election rental costs. So I mean, this is based on fully staffing each polling location. So if we don't staff each polling location with all of these devices, then that number would decrease as well. Because for me to do an election in the county, I have 6 devices you can vote on. You have 1 tabulator at the door and 3 polling booths, right? So if we don't staff it that many, because a May election just really doesn't have the turnout sometimes, we wouldn't have that cost either. That's just gonna depend on how many, but I did worst case scenario, we fully staff it. So that number will change as well.
So based on 37,000, gonna be times 12%, which is 1,200 versus 10,000. Times 0.3, which is 1/3 roughly, so $1,332.
No,
I got a different number. But I want to know if my rudimentary math is correct here. So if we're looking at about 1,200 registered voters, we divide that by 13,855, assuming this is correct, and the total cost is 8%. You do? Okay, well, I'm just looking at what I'm reading here. So if the total of 37,000 is 8%, that's like $3,000. That's a
And
big
it's also
difference
gonna
than the
depend on-
number I'm looking at here. So I'm just trying to, I mean, am I doing that right? Is that, I mean, I
Well,
know
the
this is all
way she has-
theoretical.
The way she has this contract written, and I'm not an attorney, and if there's an attorney in here, I'll defend you.
Take it every day.
The way she has this written is, like the groundwater, 2 cities and an aggregate number divided by how many would be your total cost, is how she's come up with that number. Which is how we'll go back and we'll set this up per line item, per entity based on how many registered voters you have. There's just so many moving parts. But until we know for sure, it's just a matter of making this spreadsheet a little bigger.
Thank you.
If this is a contract I'll decide to sign, if you'll just let me know. That way I can get our copy of it and, if you got some better detail here. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Mayor, I'm gonna make a motion that we table this item and request a more precise numbers so we can determine our costs. I think it's a budget issue as well. And we will table this until our meeting on the 16th. Or before the 16th on our regular scheduled meeting in January.
Councilmember Smith has moved to table this item until we have better understanding of our finances and how much it will cost to our January 10th, 2023 meeting. Is there a second? Mayor Pro Tem Barron has seconded. All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. Moving on, item 2, consideration, discussion, and take possible action on approval of assignment of Julie Shacklet as Commissioner to the Planning and Zoning Commission for the remainder of the unexpired term. I believe everybody received her application.
Good afternoon.
How are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you for the application.
Does anybody have questions?
I do. I'm pleased to see somebody up here that I see at the meetings often. One of the few in the audience, so that's great. And I was just, we never got to have this talk before. I was just curious. This isn't specifically about planning and zoning, but just what you see as the biggest challenges, coming to Blanco in the next 5 to 10 years. I know that was kind of broad, but just whatever's on your mind, I'd be curious.
Right. So I hear the concern of the growth and the parking and the infrastructure and the highway and just everything going on. And I know we don't want to turn into a cluster like Wimberley or Fredericksburg. And I just want to see positive growth and get, in front of it instead of waiting until it's urgent. So, and I go to the planning and zoning meetings. I like to just stay on top of what's going on in the town. And I've learned a lot going to the council meetings and the planning and zoning meetings. And I feel like I have some experience from being on the Economic Development Committee in Hollywood Park. We were in charge of bringing in the tax dollars for the community. And then those tax dollars were restricted to how we could spend them. And then we would suggest to the council how to spend those tax dollars within those restrictions. So I have an idea of the zoning issues and how important they are to bring in the tax dollars for the city. And so I have some experience in that.
I have one more question. Just because maybe I'm not familiar with the process. Has the current commissioner of the Planning and Zoning Commission or Board have they had anything to do with this appointment? I know you applied. I really appreciate. Is the current commissioners, are they apprised of this possible appointment?
So I can tell you what the process is. Generally, the mayor makes the appointment, the council approves it. I believe there's some people on planning commission that know about it, the P and Z that know about it. I think you may have been approached by a couple of them. What they will do after after someone is selected, they right now just have an assistant chair that's basically acting as chair, and then after someone is selected, whether that's Ms. Jacklett or somebody else, then they'll assign a chair to the committee. But do I know, have they been involved in the process? I couldn't tell you, but that's not normally how it's done.
Yeah, the UDC says that council has to appoint the vacancies for P and Z.
I just know with the historic commission recently, there was some concern that the commission wasn't aware of an appointment until after it was made, and that I understand.
Yes, and for historic, it's appointment by the mayor. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I would like to move that we approve the assignment of Julie Jacklett to serve as Commissioner of Planning and Zoning for the remainder of the unexpired term.
Mayor Pro Tem Barron has moved to approve the assignment of Julie Jacklett as a commissioner to the Planning and Zoning Commission for the remainder of the unexpired term. Is there a second? Councilmember Smith has seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3, consideration, discussion, and take possible action to approve contract award for fiscal year 2023 pavement restoration program and authorize city administrator to negotiate and execute such contract with Titan Milling, Inc.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, residents. So when we put this together, Byron with Ardura, we had kind of set up the fact that we would look at a certain amount of base repair and a certain amount of edge repair. That base repair is 3,125 yards of base repair, which is basically your potholes. But it would be more than just potholes. You'd actually do a saw cut, take out any of the materials inside that pothole that is deteriorated, and then you would put in this base repair. I think when we sent that to you, that it kind of talked about materials. I won't get into that. And then also, just to give us a little flexibility, our engineer put in 500 linear foot of edge repair as well. So what we're looking at today is Titan Millworks. We basically got two people that had bid on this. They were the low bidder with the amount at $233,000. What I'd like to do is to just make that $250 and add the additional repair, the additional base material, so we can try to fill as many potholes, edges, that sort of thing. So that is recommendation, is to approve the bid from Titan Millworks, but then also to have this at $250,000. We'll just add some additional material. We're hoping that we correct about 60-65% of the damaged streets right now. Questions of staff?
This a one-time deal, they come through and or are they, is it a contract to be?
So right now, it's a one-time deal for $250,000. $100,000 of that is from last year's first tranche, the first tranche of the ARPA money, the American Rescue Plan money. Then also the additional 150 would be the second tranche. If you remember, each tranche was $254,000. But to answer your question, this is a one-time deal for now. What we will plan to do in the future, probably the next budget cycle, is actually have a plan of of now taking what we did in January and February and applying that and doing some kind of program, maybe whether we'll have to decide, council will have to decide whether we're going to hire someone to do potholes and do different repair work, or if we're going to actually have a contract with a company. But at that time, if we keep going forward, you're probably looking at a much less. You're not looking at 250. You're looking at 75 or something. So this is the first step in having a repair program. But we're not there yet. I don't have the financing yet to provide to you.
You know why that's quite a difference in bids. Yeah, why that one was so high.
No, we haven't spoken. No, we haven't spoken to the other company. I mean, we've dealt with this other company, the one that had the $500,000 bid, and I think they've done some work at Cielo. I talked to Byron. These folks check out. They do good work. They've done some TxDOT work, Titan Milling, and they're out of Fisher, so they're local. So, and then essentially, I'll be supervising this along with Byron, and we'll just make sure that the quantities. And so, what the process will be is, after this is approved, we'll go out and mark the streets, and we'll make sure that every linear foot and every square yard that they say they're doing, because we'll probably audit it from because we're using ARPA money anyway. So we have to make sure that specifically what we're saying gets done.
So other than the discrepancy in the numbers here, apples to apples, these two bids.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And Byron was comfortable with the materials, all of the things he reviewed with this contractor in the proposal. So
Yes.
Was our capital improvement committee involved in this, in reviewing this bid?
they are aware of it. It was part of their discussion, and they approved doing it in a stepwise manner. So, I mean, they understood that we needed to do this first. Their goal at this point is moving ahead so that additional street repairs that are done, additional paving going into the next budget year will be looked at with total infrastructure in mind. So they're going to target now pavement in many ways as part of what's going on under the street at the same time.
And I agree with her, but also to answer this question, when we were looking at what's going underneath, one of the people on the committee, Steve Sheffy, had come up to me and said, maybe what you ought to do is a couple months ago. He said, maybe what you ought to do is look at doing a street repair program first. He provided the list with OJ's help and some other people's help. He provided the list of the streets that are priorities, and that group had basically the list that we're using comes from that group having walked every road. And so the person that was most involved with helping me was Steve Sheffy on that committee, but they're all aware of it and they're all wanting to move forward looking at a street repair program in the future. So they will get more involved once we get this first step done.
Their whole purview was more or less about us not wasting dollars by repairing things that we're going to immediately have to break up. And
So yes, the answer is, I think the original thought was to focus more on what's underneath the water and sewer. The unfortunate part of that is because in this community, and it's a lot of communities, but not the one I'm from, the water and sewer is directly under the street. We could wait 5 or 6 years to try to fix the utilities when there are citizens now that are complaining and rightfully so about hitting potholes. So there's kind of that, what do you do? So you kind of compromise, you put together a plan to try to relieve the immediate issue. And I do want to let you know, we have filled potholes before, but that was always with cold mix. Past public works program, and even ours now, does cold mix. That only really damages your road more than it helps in the long run. So we had to do something, and eventually we will probably put together a plan to fix the infrastructure underneath, but that could take a few years, and that could take some bond issues and things like that.
how long was the bid? How long was the bid window? Was it
I think it was
Um,
2 weeks.
I believe it was 2 weeks. I think the actual window was probably 11 days.
And I just, doesn't escape me that we have a huge pavement company here in town, Fox Paving, they didn't send us a bid, I guess.
They did not.
I took them in, I took them on good package.
You did, okay, thank you.
They're not too.
Okay, okay, I understand. that.
Well, and I think the other thing to say is, this is a pretty small job. So, you know, I can't.
Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, make a motion that we approve the contract for the year 2023 pavement restoration program and offer, as recommended by our city engineer and authorized by our city administrator, to finalize the contract not to exceed $250,000.
Councilmember Smith has moved to approve the contract award for 2023 pavement restoration program and authorize our city administrator to negotiate and execute such contract with Titan Milling Inc. in the amount of not to exceed $250,000. Is there a second? Councilmember McClellan has seconded. Any further discussion?
Last question for Mr. Timeline, you think for completion of this project from beginning to end?
Well, I can tell you what I want, but I'll tell you, let's go through the steps. What we'll do after hopefully approval today is myself, the city engineer, maybe someone on CIMAC will come through and start marking the streets. After that, then we'll provide that to Titan Milling. Hopefully they get started first or second week of January. My hope is that we're done with this completely by the end of January, but we'll see.
Okay, and the capital improvement committee will be involved in.
Probably Steve will be, but yes, as a whole, they'll be involved, but there'll probably one person that's kind of helping us with that in particular.
All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. Moving on, item 4, consideration, discussion, and take possible action on the approval of city acceptance of water and sewer lines improvement, Blanco 40-acre commercial at 2400 US Highway 281 North.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So you saw this at the last meeting, I believe, and what council approved was there were to be a bond for $420,000 at a level of 3 years. After discussion with both the applicant and with a couple of people on council and our engineer, it's come to my understanding that because this product's been in the ground about 2.5 years, it'd be actually hard to have a bond in place. So what we'd like to request is a letter of credit, and have that at a 2-year term. Tim, would you like to take the rest of what we're kind of talking about as well?
We can always adjourn into executive session if you all want to get into the legal details underlying this recommended resolution, which I'm about to read to you after a quick summary. But basically, after and since the last meeting where you all voted on the 420, remember that was after city admin's recommendation of 250, and for various reasons, council properly voted 420. In subsequent discussions with the developer and their attorney, which I've been party to, and subsequent discussions that city admin had with a couple members of council, we have a tentative agreement with them, with the developer, on some modified terms, the summary of which I'd like to provide right now. My recommendation and the city admin's recommendation that you authorize the city admin to negotiate a surety arrangement to provide the six-wheeler shall guarantee and cause prompt commencement and completion of all capital repairs on the water and sewer lines to the 40-acre commercial development for a period of 2 years, and shall also cause issuance of a standby letter of credit, excuse me, in the amount of $250,000 to allow the city to complete repairs if six-wheeler does not promptly perform, provided the standby letter of credit shall not relieve six-wheeler of its overall guaranteed performance. That's the bottom line recommendation. They would be on the hook contractually to go out there and fix this thing promptly if there was a major repair. If they don't do that promptly, the city would have an option to pull on a $250,000 line of credit. If for any reason our performance in the event of their failure exceeds the $250,000, they're still on the line for any overage contractually, and we would have the right to seek recovery from them. So that's where we stand right now. And that's based on my discussions with their attorneys and his representation to the city that that's acceptable to six-wheeler. So
we have 2 years.
2 years. And our UDC provides for a 2-year maintenance bond. This is in lieu of a maintenance bond. It's another form of surety that performs the function of a bond.
Bond is not legally tenable, as it's already been in the ground.
That's correct. And it's my recommendation that you accept this form of resolution that I just read into the record. It gives you, they're on the hook contractually to the sky the limit on capital repairs, and you've got backed up to $250,000 to go in and do it yourself if they flake.
I've got a question here. Would it be unreasonable not only the six-wheeler, be liable for this, but would have a personal guarantee involved in it as well?
We can ask. He's not offered that. I'm not sure that yeah, we can ask. Okay.
I have another question. When it says the six-wheeler will make the repairs, is it very specific in there that is under the direction of the approval of the
Gonna have
city
to be.
engineer?
Gonna have to be
I just wanna make
acceptable.
sure acceptable work
to the city.
supervised. I don't want them to come to us after they patched it with something less than what is adequate and say, okay, we fixed it.
That would have to be under the supervision of either the administrator or the city engineer.
I want to make sure it says that.
Yes, ma'am.
It doesn't
It will.
say that.
Yes.
It will say that it'll be repairs satisfactory to the city, not satisfactory to them. Meaning the city admin, the city engineer,
If you see it.
they're gonna have to be accountable to us. We got that?
I don't
Yeah,
want
we're not
to
having
fix it
any.
first and then come afterwards and say, oh, it's fixed, it's in the ground, sorry, we didn't get a chance to see it.
No,
It's
no.
really good work.
I mean, the trick of this is gonna be to define in the agreement what prompt repair is.
Right.
If Warren has some specific, and Byron has some specific parameters, keep your constituents happy, that they gotta be out there on the ground the minute, ASAP. And then the other definition term will be commencement, when, sure, you gotta have some time to marshal your equipment and people, et cetera. We do too, but they need to perform as if they're part of the city for this purpose. Promptly.
Yeah, there'll be language in there because obviously when we have water leaks and we have sewer leaks, things like that, citizens don't accept, we're gonna get there tomorrow. It's gotta be an immediate situation, and that would also be that we would have to be able to draw on that line of credit immediately to fix the problem if they can't. So there'll be language in there for that.
I mean, if you look at it for your evaluation, worst case here with a proper line of credit is you've got $250,000 cover your repairs and a lawsuit against these people to recover any overage. That's the worst case scenario. And it's six-wheeler. This goes to the question of personal guarantee. Is six-wheeler investments good for that overage? I suspect they are, but, you know, I don't know that for a fact.
You know, I was just curious, so the 250,000, is that a number they presented? That's just a number y'all mutually negotiated? Is it based on any, you know, I don't know what a major repair to a pipe like this costs, so I'm curious what that would cover.
So what I can answer is that $250,000 is 20%, is 20% of the cost, or the cost of the entire system. So that $1.2 million, it's basically 20%. Do we believe that that will cover most repairs? Yes, we believe that will cover most repairs. Would that pay for an entire, let's say a whole segment or several segments of lines are, you know, need to be replaced? Maybe it wouldn't. So, but what we normally require is 20%, and that's where that 250 actually comes from.
Okay.
How extensive is this development? What are they putting in out there? Or what are their, submitted any kind of
So
plat or?
So the water line and the sewer line, I can't remember how long it is now. I can't remember if it was 4,000 feet long, but the property that would immediately hook onto it would be Panel Construction. And they're the folks that you see them around. So they have a building out there. I think they're a couple of acres. This water and sewer line would allow that developer that has property around there to start allowing people to hook onto the public system. So right now there's just Panel Construction that would hook on there, but there may be other businesses in the future because that will become what you're doing. You're accepting the utility improvements, and that would become part of the public system.
A total of 40 acres.
Of totally 40 acres, correct?
Just within the city limits or in there?
They're all within the city limits.
Okay.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
talking about the ETJ.
No. And as you remember, even if that line, which does go up to the city limits line, you remember that the UDC specifically states that that you shall be in the city. So to allow anybody to hook onto your water and sewer system outside the city, they'd actually have to annex, and that would have to be approved by council. So you have control there as council.
Is there a motion?
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the resolution that's presented by our council, regarding the 6 wheeler property and the 40-acre commercial park lot at 2400 US Highway 281 North. And the highlights of that point were that this would be a 2-year term guarantee for maintenance on the property, on the services. It would be secured by a 2-year line of credit that our election, the city's election, we can make draws on to cover costs for repairs. And it would require a guarantee from the owner of the property.
In the amount of $250,000 line of credit.
It's guaranteed on that.
Well, the guarantee, yes,
Yeah.
but the line of credit,
LOC is $250,000.
that's what I'm.
And I'll also make a comment that I felt strongly about this and have been kind of digging my heels in, and this does satisfy my concerns.
Okay, Councilmember Smith has moved to approve the resolution that was presented by council for the city acceptance of the water and sewer line improvements at Blanco 40-acre commercial at 2400 US Highway 281 North. And that includes a 2-year term maintenance, a 2-year line of credit in the amount of $250,000, and the other stuff that was mentioned by our council earlier. Is there a second? Mayor Pro Tim Barron has seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. Moving on, item 5, consideration, discussion, and take possible action on approval of resolution 2022 R016, authorizing the submission of an amendment request to Texas Department of Agriculture for Texas CDBG Project 7220040.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, residents. I'm going to go ahead and read out the description of what you're actually approving, and then we'll go backwards and we'll give you a little bit of background as to why we're here right now. This is for council to approve a resolution to commit to funding the difference between the roughly $300,000, I'll spell these out, Texas Department of Agriculture Community Development Block Grant and the $1,437,847 construction bid, plus engineering and other professional services. The gap in funding is estimated to be about $1.2 million. So what does this all mean? So about a year and a half ago, you as council or a council before you approved a rehab project for our lift station. From there, it was determined by both administration and council that instead of doing a rehab, what you would do is you take this project and actually move the lift station physically out of the floodplain. So, and that actually is a sound engineering decision. Having said that, the original grant was only $300,000, which I believe was about $258,000 in the actual rehab and about $42,000 in other costs, which would be engineering and administrative costs. So, in providing this act of moving everything out, there has been additional costs. That costs are at about $1.2 million. To keep the TDA grant, there were two things had to happen. Number one, and the most important thing, the bid had the bid and the construction bid had to be approved before the end of January, which we have done. And that would be to grant the extension for the $300,000. The second part, which is where we're at today, is that TDA wants a guarantee or from council that they would actually fund this. So that is what the request is today, is that we get a resolution from council that you'll actually fund this difference. Having said that, what I didn't want to just ask for this amendment resolution without giving you a little bit of specifics. On January 10th, when we meet again, our financial advisor will go into this a little bit more, but generally how we can fund this difference is by doing something called a tax note. And that tax note is a 7-year note. And the reason why it's important to do something flexible is because we've had discussions with Texas Water Development Board. The second portion of this is the TDA grant is only one part of this. We also hope to get additional funding from the Texas Water Development Board. There's something called a PIF. We got approved for the water PIF. We did not get approved for the wastewater PIF at this time. The idea is that we'll eventually get approved for the wastewater PIF, which will be a combination of both grants and low-cost funding. A tax note, which will still be at about 3.5%, which is what most of the notes are right now, is better in the sense that it's easily transferable. Texas Water Development Board would be fine with it. However, the reason why people don't always do that is because you're only allowed to have a 7-year note. If in a later time we find that we can't get the PIF or something else, you can always recast this into a 30-year loan. That will be much better explained by Craig Cunningham than myself. But I just wanted to give council and the public just a little bit of an understanding of how we would finance this. So just asking you to finance it, I want to just kind of give you a little bit of heads up of kind of how we do that. There's some numbers, and obviously when you do this, you would put this on our interest in sinking fund, and that would basically be debt service. But we're gonna have to do that. That was committed. I mean, we're already kind of committed to that anyway, but that is why we're here today. So I'm gonna go ahead and go backwards. What you're today approving would be a resolution to commit to the funding the difference between the 300,000 and the $1.437 million roughly that this project would take. Questions of staff? And I do have the finance person here just in case you try to stump me.
My comment on this would be, one, we have to, this is a major project. Two, I am optimistic that we are going to get the PIP funded through the Water Development Board. The next round of funding, if our second application didn't make it this time, I think it's a good project. We're in a good place with them. Our dealer's got a good relationship with them and it's constant contact. Our consultant, Bill Moriarty, there. And thankfully, we have a city administrator and finance director that understands funding options and ways to get this done with some different ways to do it. We can't afford to walk away from the 350,000 that we need, and it's a project that we will have to find ways to fund. So I think to say we are committed to doing that is not a far leap, but that we are committed to doing that in order to ensure we keep the 350.
I think it's an important project, and Bill Moriarty is very certain that in the next cycle or two, we'll eventually get that PIF funding.
Is there a motion?
Yes, I would like, Madam Mayor, I move that, we approve resolution 2022R-016, authorizing the submission of the amendment request to Texas Department of Agriculture for the Texas CDBG project 7220040, ensuring our commitment to funding this project.
Mayor Pro Tem Barron has moved to approve Resolution 2022-R016, authorizing the submission of an amendment request to Texas Department of Agriculture for Texas CDBG Project 7220040. Is there a second? Councilmember McClellan has seconded. Further discussion? All in favor? All opposed?
Madam Mayor, I recuse myself.
Okay. The motion carries unanimously 3-0 with Councilmember Smith abstaining. Moving on to item 6. Consideration, discussion, and take possible action on single city council position vacancy and related holdover status.
I would, I'll just open some discussion for there, and perhaps for benefits of folks who may not have been to council meeting this year. With our, strategy, we should just do a re-evaluation of what our options are regarding the.
Sure. As you may recall, at the last meeting, we had 3 consecutive absences of council member. Councilperson Devine, she's therefore, a vacancy was therefore created. She's now in a holdover status, subject to your action to either continue that holdover status until the next regular election, or appoint someone in the interim, or hold a special election. I certainly don't recommend you hold a special election with the numbers you just saw, but at least not immediately. You would for the May election if you appoint someone. So if you choose to appoint someone, that's an obvious option. That person, that slot would be up for election in May of 2023. If you just remain in a holdover option, you could stay in holdover status until the end of Ms. Devine's term, which is May of 2024, or you could appoint someone at any time until that time. So those are your options. I hope I've explained them well enough.
So this appointment would go until, 24,
Well,
if we were to appoint someone.
if you were to appoint someone before May of 2023, that slot would be up for election in May 2023 for the 1 year remaining in the term. If you wait till after, if you stay in holdover status and you appoint someone after the May elections, that person would stay in office until the election in May 2024. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
My view only, open for discussion, public council members may. If the city has so much important business ahead of us right now, that if we can find someone that we feel confident is qualified and has a true interest in wanting to serve, that we consider appointment. But I'd like to convey that there's a possibility of appointment and at least call for applications of citizens who would be willing to serve and would be willing to serve in a way that they would carry on, not just fill it until May, but would be willing also then to be on the ballot for May to finish out the year. That's one thing to consider, and this is a tough spot, and there are pros and cons to all sorts any way we go. So I throw that out for any comments or thoughts from any of the other council members.
I agree that we need to consider filling the position with somebody that we think would be a benefit for our city. So, the mayor was gracious enough to, draft an application, and we maybe considering putting it in the newspaper or something, so it would be public, or posted in at the city hall also. And it looks very good to me. I have one comment on it, and it says, have you lived inside the city limits for over 6 months and in the state for over 12 months? And I think I would like to clarify that, and I'd like it to say, has your primary residence been in the city limits for over 6 months and in the state for over 12 months? And just kind of clarify that one item, and I would support, I don't know if you need a motion or what, but making that modification going forward.
Yes. Are we done discussing, or?
Well,
I think we can have more discussion first, and then once we get to the motion part.
Well, if we go this direction, I think it's great. Should we decide today on what the window of application should be?
Yes, I think so. I would
Yes.
consider- I would personally like to see if we could be ready to appoint by January. And so I know it's the holiday season, but we've got 2 weeks in January for that meeting. We could also do a special meeting if we couldn't get that done over the holidays, but I think it's a good time.
But I would also like to, if we go through the application, just like it's gonna hire somebody, go through the application, find your candidate or candidates that you want for that position, then I think there will be an interview process, and maybe we could conduct that interview at the next meeting and have us, just like we did with the PNC, just kind of have a dialogue.
I have a question for the city secretary. So, if you don't mind, so if we appointed somebody before our May 2023 election, what is the filing deadline for applicants for the next election?
Filing deadline is February 17th.
So if we appointed somebody, put them in the position in January, would they too then need, if they wanted to move forward past just?
Yes.
Is this a valid question
They would have to file by February 17th.
as well?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So So that means that you're gonna appoint.
Because you would appoint them,
And then they would just be filing to run for a single year.
right, because you would appoint them.
We're asking a lot of this person. I'm just curious, yeah.
If you appointed them in January, they would know that their term expired in May of 23. And then they could file for office and run for the year 23 to 24. And then it would be a regular election for a 2-year term.
And then, so how does that look on our ballot? So, you know, like,
That's a good one.
well, you know, can only that person that we appoint file for that?
No, other people,
For
other
that
people.
single year?
Mhm.
So the applicants, the candidates choose whether they want to run for the 1 year or 2 years, and then.
On the application, on the application for place on the ballot, you have to specify, like, you're running in the general election, and you're running for, like, I'm running for mayor, or I'm running for council, and I'm running for general election. It's like 2 separate elections. They're held on the same day. It would be a special election. It's you've got your general election, hiring a mayor and 2 council persons, and you have a special election, hiring or electing 1 council person.
Are the filing deadlines the same for special election?
So just because, I know I'm with you, I'm trying to understand this now, so just because a person is appointed by us, doesn't mean that that person couldn't decide, could that person be eligible to run for a 2-year term? Okay, that's what I'm trying to understand. Still, it's confusing to me.
We can't run for both.
Right, but I mean, they can't, they're not excluded
Right.
from running for a 2-year seat just because they've been.
That's a good point. They
still
could,
run.
they could fill that spot and decide they want to run for the 2-year term.
Okay, they could love that January meeting in February could be so awesome. That they just knew they wanted to go for the whole 2 years.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Or they run with their hair on fire in the street.
Yeah, that's a good question. They could run for the 2-year term.
Okay.
Okay.
I think even if we have to have a special meeting, we need to move quickly and get them interviewed sooner than later.
I agree. We should have an earlier meeting. If we had,
And let's go back to the dates, I'm sorry, excuse me, but right on the date. So if we got it in the paper and the mayor posted on the website, the grapevine and Blanco, social media takes over, shouldn't take too long. And then we put it in the paper next Wednesday.
That'll be the 28th, December 28th.
And so we asked for all applications to be filed and turned into the city secretary no later than the following week. That's really gonna be like 2 weeks, because people are gonna know about it before they're gonna see it in the paper, likely.
We can post it
We
as soon as possible.
Right.
We can post it on City Hall on the website, like, right away.
Yeah. So that gives about 2 weeks, which should be plenty of time.
and then we will special.
The first week in January.
January 10th is the regular meeting.
Yeah, so that would be, if we could either do it on the.
January
I think if
3rd.
we met that week before, then we might be ready. to-
January 3rd would be 2 weeks from today. That's the first Tuesday in January. That's-
Right, then,
No.
Tuesday, but that would give the 28th to and then that Wednesday, or meet that Tuesday after it runs in the paper, or Monday or Tuesday, whenever in there, next to deadline.
I don't know if you got a deadline. I mean, we take the applicants that we have.
Well, that's what I mean.
We evaluate on that meeting, and if not, if somebody else turns, if we don't find somebody
Right.
that we think is gonna work in this position, then it's still, somebody else will send one in.
Well, that's true, I think
And
if
then,
we,
I mean, after that meeting, after the 10th, they'll know.
right, we just need to know,
We'll set a goal of the 10th,
yeah,
but it may be February, and then it's too late for them to sign up for the next election. So I don't know.
right. We'll just see what happens, we'll see what comes in, we need to let them know when we'll be deliberating on people who've expressed an interest and turned in their applications. So
My, hopefully,
Deadline aside, what I'm hearing though is applicants will be given a 2-week window from the first publication of the petition. Is that correct?
It would be, if we posted on the paper, it would be not quite 2 weeks.
When's that?
The paper, it will be in the paper on the 28th. Because
That's
we're,
as soon as we can.
yeah, because the deadline's passed
But
for
it'll be
today.
posted on the website.
But I can post it tomorrow,
Yeah,
If
whatever
City
we
Hall
agree
on the website.
today on the website and get it flowing.
right,
it'll flow pretty quick in time.
it will. Website and social media on our Facebook page and that, I think it'll travel pretty quick.
Just recognizing this is a much more complicated process than if we just waited till after the May 23rd election.
And then they get resolution to this. You know, that's the way to say it. But I think we need to be proactive in trying to solicit somebody and let people know that we've got an interest in filling it. And if we can't fill it by then we can't. Just sit. So, will you need the motion or?
If you leave it blank until after May, then it would just stay empty until the following year.
But we could.
Or you could assign someone after that,
Yeah, you
but
guys,
you wouldn't have a special election.
I don't hear that the motion would be that you must appoint someone. You're gonna go into an evaluation mode and then
Right.
decide.
We're gonna make the best decision we can.
Right. We're going to solicit interest.
Yeah.
And evaluate.
And is there any way to judge the cost, how much extra cost? Because that part would be considered a special election.
We gotta do it anyway.
I don't know, just throw some.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We tabled that one, but I still want to know what our election's gonna cost.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
I move that, we post on the website that council will be considering applicants to take council member Divine's position, and that we ask the interested parties to apply for consideration.
Would you like to use this?
Yes,
With the amendment? Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Barron has moved to approve taking applications for consider of appointment to the governing body of the city of Blanco with the application that has been presented with the modification having it say, has your primary residency been inside the city limits for over 6 months and the state for over 12 months? Is there a second? Councilmember McClellan has seconded. Further discussion?
As far as the modification, Councilmember Smith is discussing, is that in any way statutory? Can we do that?
That is a statutory requirement.
But I mean, there's nothing that'll supersede that or.
That is the
conflict with it.
What I read is the state requirement.
And then we're not agreeing to what the process will be of interview and possibly selecting somebody.
We will be getting the applications now, and then at our January 10th meeting, we will reevaluate.
Well, if it's big for special.
Right.
If-
beforehand, we'll have to.
yeah, I think if we end up seeing that we've got, a whole plethora of wonderful applications of people wanting to serve that look great, then we may call a special meeting, look at it and attempt to go, wow, look at all this, let's do this January council, we'll see what the response is, but at least it'll make it clear to the residents that we are attempting to seek out interest for this seat to a point. Whether we do or we don't is gonna depend to a great extent on what we see, what's the interest who's coming forward.
Mayor, and I'm curious, the posting on the website, the language.
I'll get with our attorney to make sure that
Clear
it's
that they know
clear.
what they're applying for.
Yeah.
Well, I think at some point, maybe we can help clarify that it's just to fill a 4-month period or 3-month, whatever it is. That's what they're not, because if I read it in the paper, I might think, okay, I'm gonna take Councilor Devine's position and I'll come up to election in 24. That's not the case. This is a short 3-month, 4-month plan.
And I can add some language on, maybe on the application itself to say that this is until the special election on May 6, 2023.
I think that,
Yeah. I think
That-
that'll clarify.
I think it would, it might, some people may want to help a little bit, some people may want to, don't want to go there unless they know they can help longer, so.
Just, let's say, continue to get it all straight in my head. The applicant could fill the position for those 4 months. And then by the February deadline, they could also, say they're gonna run for a 2-year term. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
If we also notify the editor, this could be in tomorrow's paper.
I think their deadline's noon now, but we can try.
But it would be,
Yes.
Like, stick it in, so small, I mean.
Yeah.
There's so much space for those. Right. I can try.
So we had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. I do not believe we need to go into executive session. So do I have a motion to adjourn? Councilmember Smith has motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem Barron has seconded. All in favor? So at, the motion carries unanimously. So at 2:18, we are adjourned.